Welcome to another episode of Brace for Impact, covering all things Impact Wrestling. As always, live from No Cell Studios, I'm the Ace of Tavern, Acefield Retro. And joined on this beautiful Thursday evening with @mullet.mania, Colton Jesse. What's up, dude?
What is going on, brother? Man, just the road continues to bound for glory, man. Another great episode of Impact Wrestling.
And we are perpetually stuck in Memphis, Tennessee at the GRACELAND for these tapings, and it seems like it's never ending. We are in week 3 of 4. They jam-pack so much in those 2 nights tapings. You and I were just discussing off air. It feels like it's the tapings that never end, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's amazing that they have the foresight to keep the progression towards the biggest pay-per-view of the year by jamming it all into, essentially 2 nights of tapings.
Yeah, man, doing 4 weeks of programming and 2 nights of tapings in one town is you said it right there, man. Foresight. It takes a lot of pre-planning to be able to keep that together and make all the storylines still make sense and flow. And yeah, it's pretty impressive, man. And I don't think we were just, like you said, we were discussing before we went on air. I don't know if they usually do 4 weeks worth of tapings in one town. I know that they might have long ago, but I feel like usually it's just 2. So man, yeah, Memphis got a real treat. And no matter how big of a wrestling fan you are, man, if you taped that much programming in 2 days, the crowd's beat by the end of it. There's no way that you're not.
Yeah, and if you look at the spoilers, as we mentioned week after week, when they do these bulk tapings, they're out of order. So some of this, like, you can go in and figure out where it was taped. I'm sure someone has the list of the matches as they kind of were aired in front of the live audience. But that's what we're seeing here. And some of these shows, it was a Friday and Saturday taping. Some of these shows could have been all discombobulated. It doesn't really make sense progression for storylines. Of course, the backstage segments are being taped elsewhere, and that's also added to the show. That makes the context feel different. The announcers having the foresight during the show to kind of know where they are. It's hard for us to keep track, but the fact that Tom Hannafin and Matthew Raywald are able to just pivot on their feet and progress, and I know they got people in their ear and stuff, but it's a lot to be said, man. 4 weeks is a long time, and especially as you build towards Bound for Glory, I can't imagine any other company doing that, but it's a good way to save money. I know they're moving away from this model with the investment in infrastructure and production value, so we're going to see that change, but I give them a lot of credit for having, like we said before, the words foresight and being able to proactively plan and have these things seamless. I mean, if you didn't know, you would just think that this is just a live show progressing towards the story, because it really does fit like a puzzle.
Yeah, they do a great job of it, man. I mean, if you weren't smartened up to it, there'd be no way to tell.
Yeah, 4 weeks of Memphis tapings. Like I said, this is week 3 of 4. So next week, we're still going to be there. We have the little tag on our graphic on YouTube with the Memphis Mid-South taping. So, stay along for the journey. We're about a week away on Saturday. So just coming up this weekend from the biggest show of the year. And man, we're flying through October. October 21st is right here. So, but before we get there, let's make sure you guys support the tavern. Go to theturnbuckletavern.com for all your needs. And we'll, of course, do all our shilling at the end. But I think it's time for us to get into the insight and discuss all the news in Impact Wrestling.
The insight.
All right, here we are with the news segment called The Insight. And not a lot of news because, like we said, they've been pretty stagnant for 4 weeks because they did all these tapings in bulk. But we have some things going on. A lot of the Impact superstars and personalities are doing some media rounds of getting prepared for Bound for Glory. And we'll get to that in a second. But let's start with signature match type that was returning to Bound for Glory 2023. We got the announcement tonight on TV, but they announced today on social media that PCO, Rhino, Steve Macklin, and Moose will face off in a Monsters Ball match at Bound for Glory. So we know that's going to be taking place, as we mentioned before, Saturday, October 21st. The parameters of this match, Monsters Ball, is essentially a hardcore match. We saw this debut back all the way in 2004, so almost its 20th anniversary. In Colton, we've had about 50 plus Monster Ball matches. So this is an event, a match that is pretty, it's dripping in history with TNA/Impact legacy.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is a already stacked card that didn't necessarily need anything else added to it, man. But I welcome it. A Monster Ball match is always a good time. And man, PCO, Rhino, and Steve Macklin and Moose. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, man. Excited to see, we haven't seen a ton out of Macklin since he's been back, at least in ring. We've been seeing a lot, backstage with him week to week, especially with these segments with Bully Ray. But I'm excited to see Rhino be back in the ring as well. And, you know, like you mentioned, PCO's contract, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It was set to, you know, it's set to expire shortly after Bound for Glory. His contract's up October 30th. You know, hard to say if he's going to be around on a handshake deal or not. I mean, you know, Impact does a good job of that, where you hear a lot of guys with their contracts up, but they still stick around. They kind of come and they go, and I think it just speaks a lot about the promotion and just the general vibe and, you know, way they do business. If, you know, you're on good terms with them, you don't necessarily have to be signed to be able to be around and also be written into a major storyline.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is a match made famous by Abyss, and PCO is sort of carrying that legacy on. And a lot of the spooky / dark, ominous characters have utilized this match to progress storytelling. Of course, we last saw this back in February with Trey Miguel defeating Crazy Steve. So, like I said, this match has been spammed across Impact history. We've seen it a lot, and they're just stacking this Bound for Glory card as we reference week after week. And of course, we'll preview it in full, not only on Wrestling Tonight. Maybe we'll have Colton on for Wrestling Tonight to preview Bound for Glory, but we also are going to be talking about it here. And of course, our main event, Alex Shelley is defending his championship against Josh Alexander, in a match that everyone is super hyped about. But we also got the Knockouts Championship on the line. Trinity defending against Mickie James. Will Ospreay against Speedball Mike Bailey. We have the X Division champion Chris Sabin defending his title against Kenta. We also have the tag team titles are now official. We saw that tonight. Of course, we'll go through the results tonight. The Rascals, Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz defending against ABC, Ace Austin and Chris Bay. We also have the Impact Knockouts Tag Team Championship on the line. MK Ultra, Mas Slamovich, and Killer Kelly defending against Deonna Purrazzo and Tasha Steelz. As mentioned before, the Monsters Ball match, PCO versus Rhino versus Steve Macklin versus Moose. We get the 20-person Call Your Shot Gauntlet match. We figured out who's going to be number 1, who's going to be number 20. We'll talk about that in the results. And of course, we get the Hall of Fame for Impact. Mike Tenay, Don West, and Tracy Brooks are all being inducted. What a jam-packed night in Chicago we have on our hands, Colton.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a hell of a weekend. And the Fallout the next night's got some incredible matches coming up too. I mean, it's their biggest show of the year, and I mean, they're not holding anything back.
And also, it's kind of an end of an era situation because, as we mentioned before we kind of alluded to it, there is the change in production value, and that is they mark Bound for Glory as the closing the book on it and changing the way they do things, less tapings, maybe a little bit more emphasis on the product on the screen. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. We know there's been some investment in equipment, investment in process, maybe some new personnel. But, you know, is there anything on your end you're looking forward to as far as streamlining the process of what things look like on Impact? Is there something they could do better that you can think off the top of your head?
I mean, I think we're starting to see when they first made this announcement, I think we're already starting to see small examples of it. Just a little bit of a little bit of a makeover in the on-screen products. I mean, we're already seeing the lower thirds graphics are already different, already got a new look to them, which I'm really excited to see. So really I'm excited to see. I want to see a little bit of a change up in the set. And I think we've seen a little bit of that, but I think there's more to come as they really, show us everything they got as far as what these, investments have been. So I'm excited to see the set. I mean, I can already tell some of the lighting equipment's better on some of these tapings in Memphis. So I'm excited to see what the product, but just visually, just to see it come up just a little bit to be a little bit more on par with the other big twos is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it happens pretty quickly. We saw overnight with AEW. I mean, I know they announced the color change and the graphic change with the hiring of Mike Mansour and the production value. It happened literally overnight. Like, people were looking forward to seeing the new set. So I feel like we're going to see the same thing with Impact. There's going to be some picture that arises on social media or elsewhere saying like Impact changed the way something looked. Maybe it's not going to be as drastic as AEW was with the color change, but like you said, I think we're seeing it progressively. They're trying things out in front of us right now. But I think the real taping model is going to be different. It's going to be an adjustment for everybody, because I don't think they're going to be taping in bulk like they did back in the day, WCW 1992 in front of a studio. I think they're moving away from that. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it seems like they're going to be doing at least more live shows, which I don't know. I mean, we referenced before that is a monetary investment because you're saving a whole bunch of money. Think about 4 weeks of live television that has to be put for Impact on AXS. Maybe they're gearing up to maybe try to lure in a bigger TV deal. They want something else maybe they're making themselves a little bit more attractive.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, and why wouldn't you at this point? If you had the resources, I mean, they've been doing well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see because I totally understand the bulk taping model. I mean, it's a incredible cost savings. I mean, and just let alone on travel for your talent. It's be interesting to see what they end up. I imagine it'll be some sort of hybrid. They'll still do some tapings, but I don't think we're going to see 4 weeks of tapings in 2 nights anymore by any means.
Yeah, and I think, that model back in the day was the backbone of professional wrestling because there wasn't social media, there wasn't a way to get the spoilers out there. It was word of mouth, and people in the local area would probably know. Like we mentioned before, if WCW was taping all their Saturday nights for the next 6 months inside of the studio in the course of 3 weeks, the people in the surrounding area would know the results, but no one would be none the wiser elsewhere. So, I know Impact they benefit from being under the radar in a lot of ways, where these spoilers happen and it kind of washes over you. You'll see it pop up on news sites. You'll see Mid-South Mayhem tapings and the results. If you click on it, you'll check the spoilers out. But as we said before, 4 weeks is a long time. So as you go back to it, I forget, even if I clicked on it, what I even read. Or because they do such a good job of shuffling the deck of cards, we don't exactly know when was this and when was that. And even though you have match results in front of you, you don't know how the story is being told. And they do a good job of piecing it all together with the backstage segments. They do a good job of piecing together by really structuring the cards. Like something that happened on Friday night and Saturday night, the front load work that they're putting in to do this and make it make sense on TV. You got to give them a lot of credit.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's masterfully done.
So let's get to here. We talked about some of the guys talking about Impact Wrestling, hyping up Bound for Glory. And we had Sami Callihan. He was in the news and his contract coming up and he seems like he's departing Impact Wrestling. He was interviewed with Cultaholic Wrestling and he was discussing a wide range of topics. And this made a lot of news here. Of course, great conversation. Sami Callihan's legacy is well established in Impact. But during it, he stated he played a crucial role in saving Impact Wrestling. You and I were talking about how integral and how important he was in Impact Wrestling. And really, he's been a stalwart of all the storytelling, former world champion during one of the toughest times as a wrestling promotion with, shutdowns and all that stuff. But the quote from Sami Callihan spoke volumes to me. And I think he will be valuable anywhere. We talked about this on Wrestling Tonight. He would be a valuable asset no matter where he goes, whether it be WWE as a producer, whether it be AEW in the back. I know he's good friends with Jon Moxley, but the quote here, I'm curious to get your reaction with it. And he said, quote, "People can talk about matches or world championships. I talk about being one of the people. I feel like I was part of the reason Impact Wrestling got saved. Impact was in a terrible position with the old regime. The new regime came in with Scott D'Amore and Don Callis and all those guys. And I've said this in interviews before, but having a world championship or match of the year or wrestler of the year, moment of the year, which I won all of them, my resume is great. But having on my resume, like, when people look back at this 10, 20, 30 years from now, they're going to say, Sami Callihan was one of the people that helped save Impact Wrestling. I truly believe that." So your thoughts on this? I feel like you and I both are in agreement with his importance and really where he stands in the hierarchy of Mount Rushmore of Impact, for lack of a better term. But your thoughts on what he said here?
I mean, I think it's absolutely true, man. I mean, and you could read this and be like, "Oh, that's not very humble." Well, I mean, man, in this situation, he doesn't really have a need to be. I mean, he's one of the guys that really put this. Like we say this about Moxley and AEW all the time, and it's very fitting that they're friends. They're both Ohio guys, and both have very similar mentalities about the professional wrestling business. And this guy really put Impact on his back, and in a time that it really, really needed it, man. And like we said, his contract's also coming up, and it doesn't look like he's signing anything exclusive. It'd be interesting to see where he lands, and I know when we get to the coverage tonight, him and Rich Swann's match tonight blew me away, and I don't think this is the last we see of Sami Callihan in Impact by any means, man. I mean, I think that's one of those guys that he'll be able to come and go as he pleases, and I'm just looking forward to seeing the next step. I mean, I don't think wherever that ends up being for him, I mean, he deserves every bit of his flowers for what he's done for this company.
And the thing I took away from this as well, and obviously I'm not putting my emotions towards him, but you have to feel a certain type of way. If you felt you were this important to saving them during a dark time, reaching into the valleys of hell where Impact was at one point, where, think about the Anthem days and the stuff where this company was, where easily anyone without the stick-to-itiveness that this promotion had, or with the ability to save them like Scott D'Amore and Don Callis had, this promotion would be long dead. And I think Sami Callihan can be thanked for what he did, sticking around and telling meaningful stories at a time where there was a void of it. And for the fact that they're not renewing his contract, of course, we're not behind closed doors. We don't know exactly these conversations. I would apply myself in the situation and think like, even though they may not be utilizing me, maybe they're moving towards a younger roster. Your importance, we just talked about it. I think he'd be a great asset for WWE or AEW as far as behind the scenes goes, the knowledge of the in-ring and how to put together a match. Why can't Impact have him in that role? And it's interesting to me. Again, we're not privy to those conversations, but if everything is on paper that they're just letting his contract expire, not renewing him, maybe money's the issue, or maybe he's not desired to be there right now, I would feel a little bit slighted. I would have to feel like that.
Yeah, interesting to say, man, because I feel like we haven't really heard a whole lot about why it's not getting renewed, like even from Sammy. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of room for speculation there. But, I mean, I would say it makes sense to me that he wants to go somewhere different at this point. I mean, and whether that be in ring or behind the scenes, I mean, he's spent a lot of time, and he, like you said, he helped pull Impact out of a dark place. And I mean, I think there's something to be said about, knowing when it's your time to move on. I mean, Sami Callihan's not a guy that I don't think he just wants to be complacent and, kind of fade away in any promotion. I think he strikes me as a guy that always enjoys a challenge and always wants to, kind of move and progress forward. And I mean, I think that him going somewhere else is I don't think it's a bad thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. If it's coming down to, he'd like to be re-signed and they're just not doing it, there's a lot of questions I have right there about that, the thoughts process behind that decision.
Yeah, and we certainly will see the way this plays out down the line. And I think, as we've seen before with different personalities, it's not about having a contract. They'll do handshake deals. They'll have one-off things. And Sami Callihan, that door has to be always open, I would imagine, for him to make these appearances. But I think, as you mentioned before, his value is immense. And I think the knowledge he has in that brain of professional wrestling, he can give back to a lot of different places. Of course, doing the stuff on the independents and having his own thing and creative outlet in that capacity. But I think as far as, the main promotions go, I think that someone would be silly not to take him. And I know, as we mentioned, Jon Moxley has the ear of Tony Khan, and the fact that he recognizes, first of all, their personal relationship, but also what he's done to help Impact and help professional wrestling at large and bigger picture thing. It would not shock me to see him working behind the scenes in AEW, in a big capacity. I think he would be needed. You need a brain trust to be established first and foremost. There's a lot of content that needs to be created. You need people to talk to. You need minds that have been involved in this business. And, I think despite Sami Callihan working Impact, and a lot of fans maybe be unfamiliar with his resume or his discography of matches, you can't dispute how important he was to the professional wrestling business. And he continues to be. He has so much more to give. And even though he's been put on ice here, him and Rich Swann, and like it kind of washes over you a little bit when you're watching this. We're going to talk about that opening match. I mean, these are two former world champions in recent history teaming together, and it almost is like they don't have a lot of story for them. And I understand in a contract negotiation, you don't want to invest too much in the story, so you're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You're not investing a lot of meat on it because the next week he could be gone. And maybe this is the match we saw his last match in Impact ever. You said it. I don't think so, but the fact that his contract's ending, it is kind of an end of an era, at least for like the modern day right now. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's at least his last one for a little while. So,
and what a good match to go out on too, with that tag title match. And he was in an important spot and go down on his back. I mean, that's how it is, man. Old school mentality, going out on your back. And I have to say, man, if he's not coming back to Impact, he will be sorely missed on a week-to-week basis.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So we also have Alex Shelley, and he made some buzz here. And this was really an interesting conversation. He was in an interview with the Wrestling Perspective podcast. And he was asked specifically about Jon Moxley's concussion at Dynamite Grand Slam. He was talking about the safety and the awareness of health, first and foremost, for the professional wrestling industry. Shelley begins explaining why trauma to the head area is such a dangerous thing. He also was talking about things you can put in place to prevent it. So this is some quotes from Alex Shelley here. He said, the scary thing about traumatic brain injuries is that you don't know how bad they are until after the fact. People can get these injuries and your brain is bleeding. You don't know what the effects will be because there's so much going on north of the neck. I've had people who've had a TBI and traumatic brain injury, and they might seem minor at first, or the symptoms weren't that bad. They magnified, and these people are dealing with these things for the rest of their lives. So he also suggested, Colton, that WWE, AEW, and of course Impact, which is his home promotion, should hire, quote, a concussion spotter to make sure wrestlers don't continue to compete if they show any symptoms or haven't suffered one. So I'll read the quote in 1 second, but we've seen this kind of become a topic. I think for the first time almost ever, we saw on SmackDown, they stopped a Rey Mysterio match because they didn't like what something happened or the bump he took. We've seen a little bit, obviously, on the other side of things. Moxley continued to work the match and was dropped on his head once more, even though he got the concussion probably in the beginning of the match against Rey Fenix. But when he's talking about concussion spotter, someone whose sole job it is to recognize the signs and tendencies of someone with a head injury, this is something that should be there. I mean, you go back to Chris Nowitzki, where he'll talk about him in a second, in this quote where his career was ended with that spot where an Edge at the Royal Rumble landed on his head. And that's it, man. So he's dedicated his life to studying what the brain looks like after these hits for football and otherwise impact sports. But your thoughts on the concussion spotter suggestion?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea by any means, man. I mean, there's plenty of room for one more body down there at ringside, and you put somebody who's an expert. I'd be interested to see from promotion to promotion what the protocol looks like, because obviously you don't want this spotter just running up into the match and running into the ring themselves and throwing up an X or anything like that. I mean, obviously there's got to be some kind of call to the referee or something, or some kind of signal. So, but I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing by any means, man, because I mean, Shelley said it best. Unfortunately, you don't know what you're dealing with until after the fact, and sometimes it's it's too late. So it's definitely anything to help keep these guys safe without. And I like the idea of a concussion spotter a whole lot better than I like a mandate coming down from the promotion of what you can and can't do to try to avoid it, because that shit is going to change. I mean, you can ban moves, you can do all you want. The concussions can still happen at any time. I mean, you're taking your life into your hands and that of your opponent every time that you step between the ropes. So I like the idea a lot. I think it's a great suggestion and cool that it came from the Impact champion, somebody who's got so much respect and whose opinion carries a lot of weight in the pro wrestling world.
So he finished the quote saying they started using these in all major sport leagues. You can have people whose job it is to watch the NHL and monitor hits, and it will be much harder in pro wrestling, right? And then he continues, we're such good actors, as it were, but some of these things you can tell right away. If you know what a flexion synergy is, or when you see something that looks like anesthesia on one side of the body, I mean, there are signs of traumatic brain injury. Certain types of motor coordination will go out the window. Certain kinds of things will happen to the body and they'll lock up. So those are things that he's talking about. And these are things where people are trained professionals to recognize it, not just like, oh, is he selling? Is he not? There's things that people can look for that is just telltale signs of something is not right. I'm sure someone was watching on TV, someone in the building, it wasn't their job to stop the match for Jon Moxley, but I'm sure there are professionals that watched that and said, there's no way he should have continued past the first 5 minutes of that match. But, there was no one in that spot. And of course, Jon Moxley says he wants to go. And that's sort of the thing, you almost have to save the talent from themselves. Same thing with football. We watch it all the time. It's like gone are the days, and it's a good thing where you just, put some smelling salts in their nose and said, get back out there. That's not where we are anymore. And the NHL, same thing. Concussion is a huge thing that they're watching for. Hits to the head are deemed suspension worthy. So these are things that are really a topic of conversation for good reason, obviously, because the long-term effects, we see the long-term effects of it. But we also have Chris Nowitzki, who, if you guys are familiar with Ruthless Aggression, he had a short stint in WWE, but he's more famous for what he's doing outside the ring. So he is the founder of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, and he recently visited Impact to discuss head injuries. And this was prior to the Moxley thing, but Shelley discussed that. He said it'd be awesome to have somebody doing that. If that's not the case, then it's good to educate the people in the back on headsets to make sure they know all these things. Again, I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think it's a situation that this occurred. That would be amazing and easy to have. Chris Nowitzki is kind enough to go around to all the major companies. We just had an Impact in December or January, and he gave a full-on presentation. He's done them yearly at certain places. It's a contact sport, though. Things will happen, and this is human error. Again, the blame should not be placed on anyone, but let's see what we can change. Then that's a great perspective. I mean, you said it before. It is a contact sport. You can't, and I know this conversation always circles around the NFL, where everyone just talks about how to emphasize safety. You could change the equipment. You can talk about, recognize an injury to take somebody out of the game. But at the very core nature of the sport, football, professional wrestling, hockey, it's a contact sport that there are going to be injuries that come from that. And if you have, in a sport or an activity that has contact to the head, concussions are going to be inevitable. I think it's a good thing though to recognize how you can at least identify when they're happening to not continue to make it worse when they do happen.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Chris Nowitzki, legit Harvard graduate, even though that was his gimmick in WWE. Dude actually went to
It's a shoot,
Harvard.
brother.
It's a shoot, and he's it's awesome. The work he's doing is incredible, man. I'm glad to see that he's still out there doing it, still making the rounds, and still going to speak to these guys in person. It's concussion spotters, man. Let's start listing those job openings, guys. Let's get these people in these positions, and keep the athletes that we all know and love safe.
Yeah, and I think it's also very interesting and it's so crazy because we're doing shot nostalgia and reading in the context of 1988 and just how far the wrestling world has come. I mean, now it's safety and protocol, and it's, back in the day, it was do whatever it takes, work 25 shows a month, get in the car and go to the next town, whether it takes Somas or Vicodin or a Miller Lite just to get you there. And now it's literally the other way around, where it's just like professional athletes, where they're sitting in an ice bath or they're having a physical therapist or they're trying to extend their careers. That's why we're seeing wrestlers work too. We have Edge almost 50 years old, Chris Jericho over 50 years old. There's an emphasis on safety, and it's only going to get better now. I mean, when you have the awareness for someone who's been in the business, he's kind of seen both sides of it, being in the early 2000s, where wrestling has come such a long way with taking in mind the safety of professional wrestlers and having an idea of their health and safety comes first. The show is completely secondary, and that is a mindset everybody can get behind.
Absolutely.
So let's get to blow by blow, and we'll talk about what happened again in Graceland, Memphis. Let's get to blow by blow for Impact on AXS.
Blow by blow.
We are making our home in Graceland. We are never going to leave. We are in week 3 of 4 in Memphis, Tennessee. And man, the crowd seemed better here. They were pumped up, and we got the long-awaited return of the We Own the Night opening montage. How many weeks has it been, Colton? It's been a while since we got We Own the Night.
Yeah, it has been, man. It's been a couple.
I think this is the 1,000th episode. I think that was.
Yes, I think you're right, man. So yeah, we've been three weeks without. So it's good to have it back. And man, what a contest to open it up with, man. We had the RASCALZ versus Rich Swann and Sami Callihan. Sami Callihan and Rich Swann getting their tag shot here. I don't know if I've ever seen a clean shaven Rich Swann, man, or at least I can't recall it in recent memory. That was I love Rich Swann, Sami Callihan's co-entrance to Sami's music, and that was the first thing I noticed. I was like, oh man, Rich looks like he took about 15 years off himself.
Yeah, man, as we know, the winner of this match will face ABC at Bound for Glory. They set this up last week, and this triangle of these tag titles has been going on. Obviously, you could poke in, make it a 4 corners thing with Subculture, but now Subculture's off doing their own thing. But the tag titles have been circular in all these spots. And of course, Rich Swann and Sami Callihan haven't held the titles, but they are owned wins over a lot of these teams. So this had a lot of build here. And as I was texting you before, they're going to give these matches a lot of time because we saw the preview of the card. 4 matches that have fit in an hour. And of course, we know the main event was going to be this 2 out of 3 falls, with one being a last man standing. Inevitably, they were going to the last man standing. So you knew that match was going to be long. I'm so glad they gave this match time. We almost got a 20-minute TV match for a tag team championship, and these guys went all out, man. I think this match was amazing, and the RASCALZ continue to goddamn cheat. They can't help themselves, and now the announcers are catching on to it, where they're literally saying, since Zachary Wentz has come back to the roster, Trey Miguel hasn't won a match without cheating.
No, not once, man. And we say it week after week. They don't have to cheat, but they continuously choose to. We were about 8.5 minutes into this match, and I was like, holy shit, the RASCALZ haven't cheated yet. I was like, are they about to win a match without cheating? They just got more time than I thought they were going to, man. They just hadn't gotten around to it yet. We saw Trey Miguel grabs simultaneously one of the tag belts and a spray paint can, brings the belt in right in front of the referee. Referee takes the belt from him, and while that happens, he pulls the can out. But it backfires, man. He tries to get Rich Swann. He ducks, and he sprays his tag partner right there in the eyes. And, man, I was texting you when this was going on because right after this, Sami Callihan hits Wentz with the Cactus Driver 97 with the assist of Rich Swann off the second rope. I thought this was over, man. I almost came out of my chair. I was like, holy shit. We know Sami Callihan's contract isn't getting re-signed, but they're about to put the belt on them and have them go up against ABC. And I mean, I was hook, line, and sinker, man. They really had me there, which would have been awesome. I mean, I'm still happy with the finish. This was an incredible match, man. I mean, this is a pay-per-view quality tag match right here, man. And I know that ABC versus the RASCALZ is not going to disappoint at Bound for Glory, but they got a lot to live up to after this one.
Yeah, I agree, man. They almost went 20 minutes, and you mentioned the near fall with the Cactus Driver 97, and watching that happen and seeing the crowd react. Even though you knew the scenario, you knew they've been building towards the RASCALZ versus ABC for months and months. It would be outside of ordinary to have Rich Swann and Sami Callihan jump the line and do that. But if anyone's going to do it, Impact would. They have the courage and the moxie to do something like that. But that's what's so good about these matches, when you have a foregone conclusion, you feel like you're there. And so many times they're watching a match where it's just, who's going to win. It's a matter of sprinkling in these near falls that make you believe. And that was a near fall. There was 2 of them in this match. This was the most evident, where he hit that move clean as a whistle. The fact that Trey Miguel kicked out, it wasn't like Zachary Wentz was anywhere near to get in the ring. So there was a real possibility we're going to see new tag champs, but then it kind of came unraveled, and they had the opportunity to win without cheating. They didn't have to, but Wentz gave Sami a low blow. They hit the hot fire flame and got the win. They had to hit him with the low blow. They didn't that's like, it's so frustrating from a kayfabe point of view to watch them, because they're so goddamn talented. We say it week after week. Miguel and Wentz are just these talented young wrestlers that go out there and they steal the show. They're athletic, they're charismatic, but they continue to cheat. And that's what puts them, in a spot where it's frustrating. They are so good at their job right now. I'm torn about what's going to happen at Bound for Glory. We've been looking forward to this match. ABC had such a great run with the tag titles. I don't know, man. I mean, these cards are hard to predict, and I'm going to kind of have to mull it over for a week and a half to figure out what I think is going to happen. But man, it's going to be one hell of a match. And like you said, they have a lot to live up to, because this match went 18 minutes of just pure nonstop action to open the show here on AXS.
Yeah, this was great, man. I'm with you. It's going to be this card in general is going to be hard to predict, but this match in particular is going to really, really give me some trouble. But yeah, man, they are just really leaning into the fact that no matter how talented they are just purebred shithead heels. They're going to cheat every single time.
So the other thing too, and I know the RASCALZ, it feels like they just won the titles, but it's been a bit now. So they're at a point where it is conceivable that they would lose to ABC and it wouldn't be a short reign. So that's what the best part is. They waited for this match, the RASCALZ and ABC, to have the payoff. This feud kind of was put on ice for a little bit. ABC was doing their own thing. And of course, we had the Feast or Fire thing, and there was a lot of discombobulation where they were focused elsewhere. But we were always going to get to the point where the 2 hottest tag teams on the Impact roster are going to face each other. And a lot of cards, I mean, this could be the main event. We have so many really well-built stories for championships, and this is one of them here. And this, like I said, this has potential to be match of the night.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Could steal any show for any card that it's on.
It's crazy because tag team wrestling is in Impact. A lot of people don't talk about it, but you have to understand they probably have one of the best built stories. Like, we could talk about the best tag teams. FTR, in my opinion, is probably the best tag team in all of wrestling right now. But as far as like the complete package of a tag team division, like, I would take Impact's tag team division over a lot of different divisions.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So let's get to this next clip. We have Heath fighting with Kenny King, and then we get this Kenny King segment with Sheldon Green. King is right in the they gave him a lot of time here, Colton, to talk about. You want to discuss the promo here and talk about what Kenny King had to say about everybody ducking him?
Yeah, man, he's really just kind of airing his grievances here, where, he's been trying to get a hold of Santino. He can't find him. And just says, everybody's ducking him for this contractually obligated rematch. And, Gene just kind of comes out and he's like, man, I can't wrap my head around anything that's going on. They, mention their problems with Heath. King says that, and so now that's who they're moving their focus to. That's just the next, that's the only target that they can keep in their sights at this point, with Santino dodging them. The Hendry situation is in the rearview mirror. And so King said that Heath's going to have a health problem, and, that his kids that he always talks about, would be eating beans and sardines when he's finished with him. And they said that the sins of the father would leave his kids broke and that he hopes Heath has health insurance. So sounds like we're going to get a Kenny King Heath match. I'm assuming this is going to be next week because I don't think we necessarily have a spot for it on the Bound for Glory card. At least not with a little bit of build. So we'll see. I always love seeing Heath in the ring. Kenny King never disappoints. So excited to see this one.
And on paper, you look at the way the pun he was trying to go for, they have a Heath problem and Heath's going to have a health problem. Like it looks, I didn't get that when I watched the actual promo, but having the notes in front of me, it looks clever, but I don't know. It didn't land for me. The promo was interesting. Obviously Heath has kids. He's doing it for his kids. They were going for that angle, but it's a nice mini feud, similar to what they did with Dirty Dango going forward. They didn't pay it off at Emergence. They did it on the Fallout show. I think that, like you said, they're going to have that probably happen at the tapings after.
Yeah, it was not definitely not Kenny King's best promo work. The guy does pretty well on the mic. This was a little bit of a miss for me as well, but either way, regardless, I'm excited for the feud.
So we had this Gia Miller interview with KALLIHAN King where we thought she'd at least like deny anything that was going on, but she put all her cards on the table and she pretty much outed herself for what she did. And we're going to talk about it here. Gia pointed out the King's team lost last week because King couldn't get along with Jody Threat. King was talking about Jody, said she didn't like her because Threat attacked her partner, Taylor Wilde, with a tire iron. And then we get Santino interrupting. And Santino's like, hey, how is it that you know that she was attacked with a tire iron? Because no one ever knew that. The doctor told me and told nobody else. And then she just flat out admitted that she was the one that attacked her partner, and the coven is pretty much no more. So this was odd to me because they didn't let this stretch out at all. Like and I don't think anyone even thought it was her. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't think it was her that attacked her. I mean, there was always the chance, but they gave us no time to breathe. And she said it's no longer long live the coven, it's long live the king, which was a cool little, tie to her name. But goddamn, like she completely outed herself, gave it no chance to breathe, no chance to build.
And like Santino didn't twist her arm whatsoever, really. He just like came out and he's like, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of fishy. He's like, oh yeah, well, you know what? You got me. It was me. This was weird, man. I thought this was and I'm wondering if like maybe Taylor Wilde has a legit injury and that's why we outed it like this, because she's not going to be available for tapings going forward. Because I mean, this is, I don't know. I feel like this should have been a little bit of a bigger deal. I mean, I think the writing's been on the wall for a while for KALLIHAN King to have a singles run. And I mean, Taylor Wilde too, for that situation. I'm not surprised that they're splitting them up here, but just the way they did it seemed kind of odd. It seems like that should be done we should at least have some sort of face-to-face between her and Taylor at this point, instead of just doing it in a promo and just doing it in a backstage interview segment with Gia Miller. It's just kind of strange.
Especially with who the Coven are. Like, they're not just a random tag team. They are one of the foremost knockouts tag team in the whole division. So you could have just did a segment where she actually attacked her. Just show it. Like, I don't understand admitting it in a backstage segment. And I guarantee for people that either watch on DVR or watching, like, they'll zoom past this and not even realize it happened. Like, I don't know. I think they'll pay it off a little bit further. And as you mentioned, maybe there's something going on with Taylor Wilde that she's hurt, but even more reason to actually have her on screen getting attacked. There's no reason she can't just lay there and act like she was attacked with a tire iron with KALLIHAN King standing over. This is a wasted opportunity. The Coven was an important piece to the tag division, and you kind of just like lost that payoff. They obviously can revisit it down the line, but you'll never get that moment back. You'll never get that Marty Jannetty, Shawn Michaels barbershop moment. Can you imagine they just had an interview in the back where Marty Jannetty was just like, was told that Shawn Michaels threw him through? I don't know. It's kind of wild to me.
Very interesting choice here. So I'd be interested to see what it looks like, because also some of the things that KALLIHAN King was saying about Taylor Wilde, just saying that she's dead weight. Like, ever since they lost the title, she's been looking to cut her. Like,
where was that energy last week? You were just feuding with Jody Threat over the fact that she attacked your partner. So now tell me, why don't you like Jody Threat? The whole thing's confusing.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. It's a little discombobulated. So I'm looking forward to seeing if we get any sort of clarity in the weeks going forward.
So we have this multi-person match: Eric Young versus Jake Something versus Jordan Grace versus Dirty Dango with Alpha Bravo, of course, and versus Champagne Singh. And whoever wins this match, Colton, will enter at number 20 in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match at Bound for Glory. And whoever gets pinned will go in at number 1. So this was just all action, dude. This match was going in and out. There was a lot of different faces and a lot of different segments here. Jordan Grace was taking some beating here, some intergender action. Really, I mean, this was a fun match. I would recommend going out and checking this. The ending kind of got a little bit out of control, of course, where we see Oleg Prudius making his return to Impact. Obviously, former Vladimir Kozlov in WWE. They expected us to know who he was. When he came through, I'm like, he looks very familiar. And I couldn't pin it. And then obviously they said who he was. I was like, okay, that makes sense. He sided with Dango. So now we're going to get a little faction with Dango and Oleg and also Alpha Bravo. And we also have Dango getting the pin on Jake Something. So not only will Jake Something be number 1, Dango will be number 20. So it seems to me like Jake Something's have to overcome all the odds because I think he's going to win the Call Your Shot Gauntlet. I don't think there's any other way.
Yeah, I think so too. This was fun. I like the continuing development of this Dirty Dango stable. I'm really digging the Alpha Bravo pair with him and their the entrance they do each week. But yeah, man, there's no way. I mean, this, and like we say, sometimes predictability is a good thing in wrestling. And I don't think it goes any other way than Jake Something going the distance and going through everybody in the gauntlet and winning this. I mean, it's written in the stars, man. I mean, look at this guy. He's come back recently. He looks like $1 million. And he also, we talk about how crowded the top of the card is for the title picture right now. Man, we ain't got to rush shit. I mean, he wins this match. It's just sometime in the next calendar year. And I think that's perfect, So, I mean, Jake Something has got world champion written all over him. I know we've talked about him like maybe potentially being a big bad. The more I watch him, the more I see how the crowd reacts to him, we're gonna have a hard time making him a heel, man. I think he's got babyface written all over him. So I'm excited to see this match. Excited to see him win because I think sometime in the next 12 months, we're bound to find a good way to bring Jake Something into the title picture.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Jake Something does have main eventer written all over him. And he is right now a victim of just the top of the card there's too much story to be told. And I think in a different time and place, they would have shot him up to the top of the card. I think the Call Your Shot Gauntlet, winning that and having a title shot for the next calendar year is the perfect way to keep him in everybody's psyche, but also kind of hold off. It would be interesting. Of course, you can do a face versus face dynamic. We've seen it happen in Impact when we're all assuming Alexander is going to win the title, but at any point, it's going to be Alexander. I think that is the person we're starting to book. And we had to hype the debate where that's going to drop on Sunday night. And on Monday, one of the topics, the one that I brought in was who should take on Josh Alexander in his first program when he wins the title, whether it be after Bound for Glory or, elsewhere, and bring eyes to the product. Will Jake Something kind of get the casual fan? Probably not. But as far as meaningful stories that could help build a new star, similar to how they expedited Steve Macklin, making him feel like a main eventer seemingly like in the course of 3 weeks. If Jake Something can get in the ring with Josh Alexander for a month, for 2 months, and just be able to tell stories in the ring, they could really have a superstar in their hands. And I think sprinkling some of that Josh Alexander magic dust on him and a program for the world title, even in a losing effort, could really reap a lot of benefits here. And like you said, Jake Something feels like you almost have to tap into it. He is an anomaly. He looks like somebody, if airport test type of thing, the old school 80s mentality. He literally looks like a 1985 studio wrestler, but he's able to work like a 2023 athlete. It's kind of the perfect package, and you'd be silly not to at least invest in him. I mean, why not, right?
Absolutely, man. I mean, I think you can do it a couple of different ways. You can have him go up against Alexander and get the rub in a losing effort, or you let Alexander run all over everybody for 11 months, and then you strap a rocket to Jake and push him to the moon, having him take it from him. I mean, I'd be happy with it either way.
It's crazy to me that the other, WWE and AEW obviously had the opportunity to take Jake Something and get him on the roster locked up long term, and they didn't. Like, he feels like he'd be custom fit for WWE, right? Like, I mean, drop him in NXT, he'd be almost top of the card, right?
I think he could, but I mean, I think that just speaks to, I mean, obviously he likes Impact, and I think that speaks to the type of locker room they have there and amount of creativity that you are allowed to have and express as a talent in Impact versus where, you end up in NXT, you pretty much getting told what you're going to do. And I think in main roster, even more so. So I think that, and it also seems like, he's got his look. I think he's still figuring out his character a little bit, and there's not I'm happy that he's doing that here in Impact and not in NXT.
Yeah, and the biggest thing too is, I mean, we're fantasy booking the Josh Alexander thing, but it's not a foregone conclusion that they're closing this championship chapter on Alex Shelley. They could wait and sort of put everything else on ice, and it's a good problem to have, the top of the card. And I think Jake Something is just at, if we're looking at this as a waiting in line situation, he's just around the corner. He's about to cross the corner in front of the building. If you're waiting in line, he's right there with all the guys. He's deserving. I think he's going to get his shot at the top of the card, whether it be against Josh Alexander or elsewhere, and him carrying around any sort of title shot for the next year could be a lot of fun. And you can build towards something really big, Josh Alexander is the guy to me. I think you put him in with Jake Something, you could make a new star. And I really believe that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we get a Crazy Steve promo, and we get some creepy stuff here. He was chanting, "The angel of death came to Tommy's room and said, it's time to go home." And he cut this promo, and they kept going back and forth, similar to like the Wyatt, clips back and forth, showing the mask and showing like demon imagery. And he was saying that he's disgusted, but also amazed with Tommy Dreamer. And he also said, "I stabbed Tommy Dreamer in the back before you could do it to me." And he then referenced Black Taurus, where we're building up the hardcore match that's going to happen on the Go Home show for Bound for Glory. Obviously, they have a history in a stable, and they have a history of being friends. And Crazy Steve is alienating every single relationship he's ever had. And he said, we're going to have a no DQ match, and then it's not going to be simply enough to beat him. He wants to teach Taurus pain and misery. Seems destined for Taurus to kind of take the big L here to build Crazy Steve as a challenger, inevitably, and maybe a champion for the Digital Media Championship, beating Tommy Dreamer at Bound for Glory, right? I mean, this is actually, they're doing the Digital Media Championship on the tapings after. That's actually what's going on. The card's too packed for it.
Man, yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about, but that makes sense. I mean, as much as I hate seeing Black Taurus this would be his 4th consecutive loss that he takes.
Dude, every time I see Black Taurus, I think of you, because of just like, I think there was a couple episodes ago, if you guys remember, Colton was saying like, I think he might be one of my favorite wrestlers. And I was like, I think you're right. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's incredible, man. He's one of my favorite doing it today. And I hate seeing him take an L over and over and over here. But also, I'm eating up this Crazy Steve stuff with a spoon, man. I mean, week to week, it's just getting better. I'm really enjoying this presentation of him. It makes sense for him to have a brutal match with Taurus and take the loss here, or to pick up the win here for Steve. And I'm excited. We talk about, elevating the Digital Media Championship, and I think that Steve taking it off of Dreamer is really going to do that. And I'm excited to see the payoff here, man. I mean, that's the thing. Like, we talk about the foresight they have with doing 4 weeks of tapings and having everything be seamless and cohesive. I mean, like I said, this is going to be on the fallout, and so we're already telling how many good, well-developed stories with the Bound for Glory card. I mean, think about how many things they've got, how many stories they've got planned and cooked up for the fallout afterwards we don't even know about yet. I mean, this is one of them right here, and I'm sure there's 4 or 5 more in the oven that we haven't gotten a whiff of just yet.
So they show Kazarian and Eddie Edwards warming up quickly to really put emphasis on the main event, like they used to do back in the day with like SmackDown or Raw. I distinctly remember Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar in the Iron Man match. They would show them like lifting the weights and just getting warmed up and ready before the match. So that, trying to build big match feel for. We'll get to the main event and talk about what we thought about it. But we get this Gia Miller interview with Speedball Mike Bailey, and this is a good Speedball promo here. I thought this was really good. He talked about really wanting everybody to step up to the plate against him, wanting to keep his momentum because that's what he needs to eventually beat Will Ospreay. And then he turned his attention to John Gresham, saying, I don't have time to be distracted. I have like my biggest match of my career coming up against Will Ospreay, and that needs to really put on the back burner. I need to stay focused. And he issued an open challenge. We'll talk about it at the end of the show, but Samurai del Sol is going to be answering, and this is another way to heat Speedball back up, inevitably to take on Will Ospreay, which is going to be an absolute barn burner match. And Will Ospreay is going to be a busy dude over the course of a couple days in Chicago, but This match, let's not overlook it. I know everyone's looking forward to Ospreay versus Alexander at the tapings after, but Bailey and Ospreay has a chance to really go the distance and at least be, top 5, top 10 match of the year.
I'm honestly more. I mean, I'm excited for both, but I'm honestly more excited for Bailey versus Ospreay. First thing I want to say though is we've been getting a lot more Mike Bailey on the mic lately over the last few weeks, and I like it a lot because that's not something he usually doesn't spend a whole lot of time cutting promos. And excited to see that side of him. He's doing a really good job. So this is going to be. I like the call out. I like that's Mike Bailey's idea of staying in the zone is just to keep having matches, man, and to keep him, iron sharpens iron. So this match with Samurai Del Sol next week is going to be awesome.
And the consistency too. They do talk about it on a lot of different promotions. They look past this, specifically WWE. They reference the time when he was X Division champion where he used to do the open challenge, and all it takes is him just to say it, because then it builds like this is something he does. He's a hardworking babyface that wants to continue to build momentum towards what is the biggest match. And even though he doesn't have a championship right now, facing Will Ospreay, one of the best wrestlers, if not the best wrestler in the world right now, is, that is that's a cream de la cream for Mike Bailey right now. And that is, man, I think this was really well done in such a short period of time. Like you said, they're giving Mike Bailey more opportunity to speak on the microphone, and he's getting better for it. I think we talk about 2023 being his breakout year. Everyone's really known who he was, but winning Bola with PWG and running through GCW and finding a home and Impact, it's been a great year for him. I still think 2024, he might be wrestler of the year, in a lot of ways. Once the right eyes get on him, there's no stopping this dude.
Yeah, this guy's going to be an absolute legend and one of the greatest to ever step in the ring. I feel very confident about that.
So we have Courtney Rush with Jessica taking on Tasha Steelz with Deonna Purrazzo. This match was, just okay. It was one of the shorter matches on this card. 3 of the 4 of them were pretty long, but they're trying to build momentum for Tasha and Deonna heading into the match at Bound for Glory to make them a legitimate contender for these Knockouts tag titles. And we have a Death Doll losing streak continuing, which I don't know what's going on with that as well. Your thoughts on this match? It was, like we said, we have Tasha Steelz getting the win. She's been a mainstay on the roster since Impact 1000, so she's been involved here. Your thoughts on this build towards Bound for Glory for the tag titles, and also what we saw here in the ring on Impact on AXS?
I think what we saw I think this match was here really just for Tasha to continue to get reps after being on the shelf for a while, getting ready for this match at Bound for Glory. I don't love the fact that the Death Dolls are just jobbing out left and right. They seem to be getting good sports about it. I thought Tasha looked pretty good. I'm excited I think that, and I like Tasha Steelz and Deonna Purrazzo as a team. Because we talked about this a few weeks back. I'm like, all right, what are we going to do with Deonna at this point? Now that she's taken her second loss to Trinity, obviously she's out of the title picture for a while, but she's still a, well-respected presence in the Knockouts division and still a force to be reckoned with. So I'm hard to say. I don't really see MK Ultra dropping the titles right now, man. I know they've had a pretty long reign, but they also haven't had a ton of defenses. So this will be interesting. I think this is probably this is the least amount of build. This is the least well-built story and feud going into Bound for Glory, but it's still not bad. So if this is the worst that we've got, or the weakest link that we have for the card, we're doing pretty damn well.
It certainly feels microwaved in a lot of ways. And like you said, Deonna Purrazzo, it was uncertain what she was going to do after dropping the title. She had the historic reign. She was the top of the Knockouts division. And usually I'm hesitant to get behind any sort of main event, quote unquote, main event talent being thrust into a tag team that feels like a throw together. But at least we have her on our TV. Like, at least she's doing something right now, because it felt like if she's not going for the championship, what exactly is she going to do? Is she going to be in the corner of someone that's challenging for the title? Is she going to be like a support system for Trinity, or like it? I'm glad she has her own story right now, because eventually when you want her back in the big spot, because you will need her in the big spot, because Mickie James is not going to be a full-time wrestler, and you're going to need someone back at the level of Trinity to go back and forth. And of course they wrestled enough. We saw Trinity and Deonna go at it, but inevitably you're going to need her again up in the big spot. And I'm glad to see her here doing something meaningful. I know you said MK Ultra probably is going to go over. I feel like Tasha Steelz and Deonna are going to win the titles. I just, because who's taking the pin? Deonna has so many losses. She's taking more losses in the last month and a half than she's taken in a year. And then Tasha Steelz, I don't really see her coming back and getting pinned here. She has some momentum. Maybe they're resetting Masha to do something different too. Like, I don't know. This is not as well built as you'd want it to be, but maybe they're building towards something bigger for Masha, and because I think she could do much more. We saw Jordan Grace in intergender action. I think Masha's mixing up in intergender action and competing for some titles.
That's a good point, man. And when you put it like that, I mean, I definitely don't see Deonna taking the pin. She's taken enough. And yeah, it would be kind of interesting to, heat Tasha Steelz back up just to immediately cool her off. And with the Coven breaking up and Kylan King entering the singles realm, I could see Killer Kelly being a great opponent for Kylan King. So yeah, man, maybe it is time for them to lose these belts and split up MK Ultra. Love them as a team, but also big fans of both of them individually. So it's going to be maybe you're right. I think, and also that gives Deonna, Deonna, to my knowledge, I don't know if she's been a Knockouts tag champion in the past. So
I don't believe she has been. So this would be a first time for her. I'd have to fact check that in a second, but yeah, this is she's building the resume. She's a legacy act at Impact. And as you mentioned before, MK Ultra is cool teaming, but they're even damn cooler against each other. I mean, the dog collar match to me was much better than what we're getting. I know we got the vignettes and seemed really cool on paper that we're going to get MK Ultra together, but it never really came to the forefront. And I'm not sure why it didn't resonate the same way that the feud did, because the feud was very memorable. Yeah. It was palpable. Like it was something that was attractive to watch on a weekly TV show, but the team hasn't been there, and they're not being featured the same way. They're in these like one-off. I mean, this is paint by numbers tag team championship build where you're having one team member face them and then have the other member in the corner. We've been doing this for the last 3 weeks, so it's hard to get behind something like that when we were seeing meaningful story. Like we said, the dog collar match, like the two of them went at it and just absolutely crushed each other. And it's hard to top that, like when they're going against each other opponents.
Yeah, it is.
So we have the video package with Josh Alexander and Alex Shelley, which was a really good video package. And the production on that end was really awesome to see. Really shows the importance of this match, where even though Josh Alexander hasn't been back for that long, this has a lot of fuel to it, because you just plug and play what happened where Alexander had to be stripped. There's so much story there, and Alex Shelley winning the title. All of that has been building towards this moment, whether it's going to be validated in Shelley's reign or Josh Alexander taking the crown back. Like, that is the most intriguing part. And the best part about the build is you're tying it all together in a neat little package. And we also get even more build with New Japan Pro Wrestling. We were talking about this on the debate, where maybe the door is starting to open up a little bit more further with New Japan and Impact Wrestling, seeing some more talent come over. Well, we saw Chris Sabin teaming with Shelley and Alexander, to take on, I think the team was Ishii, Tanahashi, and Okada in the last event of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Tanahashi wound up pinning Alex Shelley after Alexander actually ran into Shelley, and they really sold it. Kevin Kelly specifically, because he was doing the announcement that Alexander did it on purpose. And you were wondering how they were going to make sense of Alexander and Shelley teaming together on New Japan Pro Wrestling TV or the pay-per-view, because of the fact like they're facing each other, but they did do a good job of keeping consistent and telling the story, because Shelley's not a full-blown heel yet. That's the other thing we keep forgetting, is he feels like a heel. He feels like the bad guy in this, but he hasn't fully turned yet.
No, he's doing a really good job of riding the line. And yeah, I liked when they first started showing this clip on the show, I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but what's kind of the point here? And then when we get to the fact that, we had where Josh Alexander ran into him, and the fact that Kevin Kelly's insinuating that it might be on purpose. Man, I love that layer to the story. It didn't necessarily need it, but it's a really nice layer of, oh man, what if? Because, like you said, Shelley's not a full blown heel yet, and so I feel like we're kind of ping ponging between. I feel like we're making two camps for this match, and it's like, all right, who's the heel to you? Is it Josh Alexander or is it Alex Shelley? Who's your guy going into this feud, which is a unique main event, it's a unique way to have your main event built. So this is I'm excited to see what our last week of TV next week between Shelley. There's got to be at least one more small development between Shelley and Alexander going forward. So I'm excited to see what that is next week.
just to fact check us, VXT was the team of Chelsea Green and Deonna Purrazzo. They held the Knockouts Tag Team titles August of 2022. So,
Okay.
So she was a champion before, but who's to say she doesn't want to do it again? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
she likes multiple title reigns. So
exactly. She is a multiple time champion. And like you said, keeping her busy here. We'll see where they go. But the story hasn't been as thoroughly told as the other stories have. And that's just by comparison, really.
Yeah.
We're looking at these filet mignon level, like letting things base, like this story with Alexander and Shelley, despite them not being linked up for a long period of time. Man, this story's been brewing for over a year, so it's going to be awesome to see. But we have Steve Macklin, Bully Ray backstage, and Bully goes up to Steve Macklin and said, just want to confirm that you called me soft to my face and back. And then you also went out to the ring last week and called me soft in the ring. And Macklin said, yeah, I did. And Bully said, cool, and then walked off. So what are your thoughts on this? Is this like Bully Ray, I don't know, steaming up to beating the shit out of Steve Macklin and showing that edge of himself? Or is this just, I don't know, where's this go?
I think that's where it's going, man. And I'm wondering if we're going to see Bully Ray poke his head in this Monsters Ball match at Bound for Glory. Because, I mean, you don't really get away with doing that kind of shit to Bully Ray. There's gonna be a receipt coming for that. Not sure exactly when it's coming, but I mean, I think it's we're showing that obviously this PCO feud with Bully Ray really kind of got in his head and shook him up a little bit. And so I think what we're seeing right now is just kind of Bully Ray reevaluating and seeing, who he is and where he is at this point in his career. And yeah, I think once we see, I mean, obviously we knew that we've had a little bit of a feud, a little bit of a flare up with Rhino since his return with Macklin. I don't know if we're going to see much of it past the Monsters Ball match, but yeah, I think we're getting to Bully Ray attacking Macklin, and when he doesn't see it coming, when he least suspect it. And I think this would be a good feud between these guys for sure. I mean, I enjoyed their work together, and that makes it even more of a good old fashioned grudge feud.
So we were talking about this on the debate that's going to air on Sunday and drop on Monday in audio. You were saying Bully Ray eventually should circle back to the world title picture. Do you see that happening sooner than later? Or are we waiting a long time to get Bully Ray back as really a heel to overcome for eventually the champion, Josh Alexander?
I think he's got a little time, man. I think he needs a little bit more build up before he goes right back into that. And I mean, I don't necessarily, when I was talking about it on the debate, I was more so, I don't know if I was necessarily advocating for it, but definitely just the fact that I think it's a strong possibility. I mean, I'm all for it. The feud they had previously was some of the best heat that I've seen in pro wrestling, period, in the last decade. So, I mean, you can, Moose and Josh Alexander, or Bully Ray, you can reheat either one of those feuds, man, and I'm going to eat that up all day.
So they go over to Matt Raywald and Tom Hannafin. They plug All Bound for Glory, as we talked about before with the card. We'll preview that next week in full. But they also talk about the matches next week, which we would assume was taped in Memphis already about 5 weeks ago. So the last 5 of these matches will be shown next week. And we have Trinity and Mickie James teaming up to take on Giselle Shaw and Savannah Evans. We have PCO and Rhino teaming up to take on Moose and Brian Myers. Then we get Kenny King versus Heath. Mike Bailey in that open challenge versus Samurai Del Sol. And then we also have Black Taurus versus Crazy Steve in a no DQ match. Pretty awesome card. I'm sure we're going to get some stuff in between. But this is the go-home show for Bound for Glory. We have no match announced for Josh Alexander, no segment announced for Alex Shelley. We would assume we would see something like that from them, or maybe we don't. Do you think everything's sort of built up enough where you don't need any sort of crazy go-home to get people initially excited about the pay-per-view?
We don't have to have it by any means. I think it's built up well, like you said. I mean, it's like you said, the build hasn't been super long, but it's been well marinated and well developed. I could see getting another video package. I think we'll get some sort of face-to-face next week. I like the fact, I don't want to see Josh Alex. I'm not a huge fan of seeing your world champion in a match on the go-home show. I don't, because it's too risky, man. It's, what if they get hurt and then boom, there goes your fucking main event. I don't, and just, I like the idea of them being on the shelf the week before, or, in this case, I mean, this will be, in kayfabe perspective, this is 3 days prior, or 2 days prior. So
right.
I like the idea of the fact that neither of them are booked in a match. I'm, to be perfectly honest, I'm not even super thrilled about Trinity and Mickie James being booked in a match. I'd rather just maybe have some more backstage vignette, or just maybe a promo between the two of them leading up to it. But I think we're going to get some sort of face-to-face with Alexander and Shelley.
And to me, this is the downside. We talk about all the positives of the bulk tapings and being able to save money and streamline and all that. This is the downside here, because you're immediately taking out all that buzz that would be there for a SmackDown before a pay-per-view, or a Raw before a pay-per-view, or even Dynamite or Collision, because we're looking at it through the lens of, okay, they're building up Crazy Steve Tommy Dreamer with Black Taurus match. He's probably going to crush Black Taurus. Mike Bailey is going to be building the Will Ospreay match without Ospreay there. Kenny King and Heath probably could have been put somewhere else, and you could have put something else there to build. PCO, Rhino, Moose, and Brian Myers building up the Monsters Ball match. And then, as you mentioned before, Trinity and Mickie James building up their Knockouts Championship match. The card leaves a little bit to be desired. If they're not going to pepper in some of the other exciting things to have, because to me, the go home, and I understand it's taped in bulk, you don't want to give it away because it's 4 weeks ago. You don't want to have this pull apart brawl to end the show. Where are you fitting it in? You need something like that, though, on go home shows, really, to get people salivating for eventually the weekend, especially Bound for Glory. Like, you want the final image to be Alexander and Shelley in the ring in some capacity. Maybe that happens. Maybe it's just not advertised, but I want to make sure that you're selling the biggest story. And the biggest story is that title match to me. I know Trinity and Mickie James, they can tell that story. That is a big match. But the money-making feud here is Josh Alexander trying to get that crown back as he was the longest reigning Impact champion ever. He is the guy. To see him going after title, that is a big deal. And this is the biggest match we're going to have on the card, and the biggest match we've had in a while in Impact, because Josh Alexander, as I mentioned, he's the franchise, bro. Like, I think he's the guy that they've put the crown on him, and whether he wins tonight or not, he is the guy that you built everything around. This is the pillar. This is the one pillar to me that keeps the roster afloat. And I know that's high praise, but having him back is immensely important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable that you have to put the belt back on him. I mean, there's always a chance that we keep it on Shelley here, but even if we do here, it's just a matter of time before it goes back around Josh Alexander's waist. Yeah, I'm with you. We got to have some just one more little snippet. I need just a little bit more between Shelley and even if it's something backstage, man, if it's something they tape in Chicago the day before, or a couple days prior this week, when they're, like you said, the backstage segments are taped other spots. I need something else. I hope we get some sort of face-to-face between these guys next week before, because it is a disadvantage. A lot of times that is one thing. The Impact go-home shows can sometimes be a little cool, or a little cooler than you want them to, just because of the aspect that sometimes they're taped in the short term 2 weeks prior. But in this case, I mean, yeah, this was almost a month ago at this point.
More than a month too, because if you look at it, they were taped 5 weeks ago. So it's crazy how much they fit in. Good for them. Like, they definitely stretched it out and they planned it out, and that Memphis audience was privy to a lot of stuff that made it to air eventually for this build. And that's also a credit to them. They were able to build up the card enough that they could do something like this, where 4 weeks ago, we knew what Bound for Glory looked like. Of course, they peppered in the Monsters Ball match. We got the Digital Media Championship, but we knew the stories about 6 weeks ago. We've been talking about this. Go back in the archives. We're at episode 17. We've been talking about what Bound for Glory looked like for some time now. And it's been pretty pressing that we're going to eventually have this collision course for a lot of these different feuds. And that's really well done. And a lot of different promotions should model themselves after it, where, we're seeing a little bit of that on AEW side with Jay White. We know he's facing MJF over a month in advance. That's a good thing, because everything that happens on the peripheral, even if they're not interacting, it's building towards that match. So Jay White gets a win on Collision or Dynamite. That win is building towards, he's building momentum towards MJF. That tells good stories.
Oh yeah, man. There's nothing wrong with giving yourself more than 4 weeks to build a story. If you got the opportunity to do it, you should take it every time.
So in our main event here, we have a story that's been brewing for way more than 4 weeks. I mean, it feels like forever. We have Frankie Kazarian and Eddie Edwards with pretty much the payoff of this feud that's been going on for quite a while.
Almost, we were talking about the first episode of Brace for Impact. We were talking about this feud. So
It's
there's
crazy.
at least 17 weeks in.
There you go. So, and it was even brewing before that, but this is a 2 out of 3 falls match. And sometimes stipulations become a lot. And I know Impact we talked about the Feast or Fired match. We talked about you get pinned, your number 20, you lose your number, whatever, all that stuff. It gets a little bit discombobulated. This is another thing here where this feels like a WWE 2K24 match where you're like, first fall is a pinfall, next is submission. And by the way, third is a last man standing. This is something I used to do with my figures back in the day. Like,
yeah.
But they gave it time here. And of course, it's 2 out of 3 falls. So you knew the story here. The writing's on the wall. It's going to be 1-1 going into that third fall. You're never going to advertise last man standing and not do it.
Yeah.
But let's go through the match here. Eddie Edwards got the first fall with the Boston Knee Party. 4 minutes in. Interesting choice to have him win 4 minutes in, and he was the guy to get the pin because kayfabe-wise, looking at through that lens, he would have won a one-on-one match. Your thoughts on that? That was intentional, wasn't it?
What, with him getting the first one?
That was strategic because you knew that Frank Kazarian was going to get the definitive win, but they still wanted Eddie to look strong going out of this as a former world champion.
Absolutely, man. I mean, because you get him, he gets a knockout move early on. It definitely makes him look. It creates the facade of oh shit, we might have him here. If this had just been a regular 2 out of 3 falls match and we had no stipulation on it's got to be a submission, it's got to be, and then we moved to falls or last man standing, it would have been a little bit more of a cliffhanger on who's going to take this with him getting that quick pin 4 minutes in. But yeah, like you said, sometimes the stipulations get to be a little bit. We knew this was going to the third round.
So we had the last man standing match, of course, for Fastlane between Shinsuke and Seth Rollins. Just to put it in perspective, can you imagine they had 2 falls prior to that with a submission? It just, last man standing matches are exhaustive in their own way. Like I got last man standing fatigue, from that match. So now that we saw that match and then this match here, not a huge fan of the last man standing concept too. I'm not huge on it. I just think it's not it looks better on paper to like last man in 10 seconds and you have to stand up. It always misses for me.
It doesn't always miss for me, but it misses more often than it lands. I can think of one in recent memory that I thought was really great. I'm struggling to remember the year, but Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano had a really great last man standing match that I was a big fan of. That's been in the last 2 or 3 years. I'd have to go back and figure out exactly when, but that one was solid, and it ended in a way that not necessarily your. The ending is really where you send it home. And for this one, man, I mean, for this match, man, I got to be honest. So Frankie, not to jump too far ahead, Frankie gets as we know, Frankie Kazarian's going to get the second fall here. He gets him in the chicken wing. Love that submission move. Don't see it enough. Really quick.
The bridge from 4 minutes to 17 minutes. They had like 13 minutes. These guys cooked for a bit here. They were going at it, just did their thing. And this was the best, in my opinion, the best section of the match. It didn't get the "this is awesome" chant that we eventually got, but I felt like, again, submission based and technically based. This was the 13 minutes here. This was the meatiest part of the meal where it actually, all right, cool, I can get behind this. And I went into this match a little bit disenchanted with the story between the two of these guys. I'm exhausted. I'm fatigued with it. But there, the middle of it, seeing the back and forth with the single Boston leg and seeing the arm lock and seeing them go back and forth the submissions and the backpack stunner and then turn it into a chicken wing, really good sequence. And to me, that was the highlight of the match.
I thought so too, man. This was where all the story was told. And we got a lot in the last third of the match too, man. I mean, the table set up, Alicia coming out and getting involved. I guess it brings it full circle because, that's kind of where we got to, I guess you could say the second arc of this story is when Kaz accidentally hits Alicia with the kendo stick, comes full circle with Alicia coming out and beating up Frankie with the kendo stick. Him putting her through a table, I did not see coming. Just really
pretty gnarly spot too.
Pretty gnarly. Yeah, it was like I almost say it was like a Samoan drop or Death Valley driver through a table, like at an angle too, like up against the stairs, which was kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean this match was super physical, man. I gotta be honest, I was pretty impressed. I mean, you got a couple of vets out here who can definitely still go. Both Eddie Edwards and Frankie Kazarian are still in great shape. But Frankie Kazarian, man, he got cut open on his chest. And I mean, he was bleeding like a stuck pig. I mean, there was blood all over the place. He could sell those white trunks for I'm sure if he wanted to auction off those bloodstained white trunks, he could fetch a lot of money from them from a fan. But man, I tell you what, we went into this thinking like, okay, this is the end of this feud. We are a little bit fatigued with it. Kazarian ends up getting it there at the end, but man, he was so wobbly on those legs. I swear to God, in those last 30 seconds, I thought this was going to end in a draw. I really did. I was like, oh man, are we not done? This is supposed to be the final payoff, and we might get one more. So they really had me hanging on there. And but yeah, I mean, overall, man, I think this was a good match. This was a fitting end to this feud. I'm glad to see Kazarian coming out on top, man. I mean, there's no way he's the definitive. Even I don't know. I mean, I say he's the definitive babyface in this feud, but I mean, he did just throw Alicia through a table pretty brutally. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to open this story back up. We don't really need to. We've seen all we need to see, so I'll leave it at that. But yeah, you know, good to see Kazarian get the win. 34 minutes, man. I mean, this was a third of the card right here.
Yeah,
like.
It definitely was a fitting conclusion for this feud, and I think if it definitely dragged on too, not the match, the feud dragged on too long, but this match standing on its own in a vacuum was very memorable. One of the more memorable main events that we've seen and will see on TV. It's very rare we get a 34-minute match, especially on an Impact show where they don't have the luxury of having 2 hours. They have a limited amount of time. We had 4 matches here. They really extended the card here and gave these guys time to breathe. And of course, they had the luxury of having 4 weeks, 5 weeks of TV to tell that they probably said, guess what? RASCALZ, Sami Callihan, Rich Swann, you guys go out there and go for 17 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And Frankie and Eddie, you guys have the limit, man. Just stretch it out. You guys go 30 to 35 minutes. And they did that 34 minutes. And, you know, 2 out of 3 falls match leaves a lot to be desired sometimes because some logic goes out the window where things that get pinfalls don't usually get pinfalls will eventually get someone pinned in a match where that leaves a little bit to be desired, like something that wouldn't. And the kayfabe argument could be like, oh, they're saving their energy. They don't want to waste kicking out. They just want to like whatever. When they did the Boston Knee Party, I was like, okay, they're going to exchange back and forth and it's going to be something like that. But they really surprised in the middle of the match. They let everything breathe after that. Having the quick pinfall was a nice change up to the fastball they were giving us for the technically sound middle of the match. And eventually the hardcore party section with Alicia going through the table, the ECW type of vibes with other stuff. Not to mention Eddie Edwards hitting the Styles Clash on the ramp, which was something the fans reacted to. This match had a little bit of everything. Only thing it didn't have was like really my emotional investment. And that's not to take away from the athleticism and like the storytelling in the match, in a vacuum by itself. But they did a really good job. And like you said, I think this is the end. Hopefully it is the end. It has me asking what's next for either one of these guys, because you can plug and play. We talk about top of the card. These guys have been off on an island battling each other with lightsabers for like the last couple months. You could plug and play either one of these guys for a quick one-off feud with any of these younger guys, like a Jake something. You want to have a one-off feud with a guy like Frankie who can go to war, or Eddie Edwards, and showcase yourself for 25 minutes on a card. That'd be fun to see.
Absolutely, man.
So, I mean, final thoughts on this. I mean, the build to Bound for Glory has par for the course for Impact. They continue to crush it. This continues to be really just what they do, man. Like, I think they continue to show us how shows can be built, and the card is just ridiculous at this point. The video packages and the storytelling behind the scenes, like the crazy Steve stuff, all the little extra things they put on these shows, like it is definitely worth the watch. Like, that is the one thing I take away from watching Impact every single week. It's worth the watch. And looking at the way this Bound for Glory card has come together and just, in front of us with every title outside of the knockouts, tag team titles not being as heated and, as meaningful, every other story. I mean, and dream matches too, with Ospreay being on this card and Kenta too. Don't forget that, man. This card is going to be absolutely amazing. And you guys are going to be regretful if you don't order this on pay-per-view and check it out, because it's goddamn, dude, this can be a fun watch.
Yeah, this is contender for one of the best cards of the year across any promotion. Talk about dream matches, man. Trinity and Mickie James is a dream match. I think that
for sure
it's going to be awesome. It's going to two different generations of knockouts of women's wrestling. It's going to be awesome, man. And that's the hardest one to pick for me. Like I that could go either way. It's going to be, I'm really, really excited for this card.
So let's get to the impactful moment, pick our favorite moment of these third version of these Mid-South Mayhem tapings. Let's get the impactful.
Impactful.
All right, Colton, here we are again in Graceland. We're stuck in a time warp. You let me know what your favorite moment of this part of the show was.
I think I got to go with the opener, man. I think I got to go with Rich Swann, Sami Callihan versus the RASCALZ. I love this match. This was just a flurry of offense from both sides for, almost 20 minutes straight. And I got to say, if this is the last time we see Sami Callihan for a bit, this was a great send-off. And I think that's the biggest kicker for me in picking it as my favorite is this is a nice, pun intended, swan song for Rich Swann and Sami Callihan going forward. I'm excited that we got this spot, excited they got a title shot before he made his way out the door.
I 100% agree with you. They set the tone for the night. I thought it was a great, obviously that's not the function of the match to say goodbye to Sami Callihan in ring wise, but it was a really amazing match to showcase what he can still do. And it also helped further the RASCALZ up the ladder to, the legacy that they're continuing to build in Impact Wrestling as tag team champions, helping to build that feud with ABC on his way out. Love that match. I mean, close second to the last man standing finish they had here with the 2 out of 3 falls of Frankie and Eddie Edwards. But I still think the tag team title match held a little more weight for me, had a little more emotional investment and told a better story. But as far as, like I said, go back and watch that 34-minute main event. I thought it was really, really good. And if you really like pro wrestling with guys that are just like, you could tell the passion between Eddie Edwards and Frankie Kazarian. They were working so goddamn hard here where they still can compete at a very high level. They still have a lot to give. And that's the beautiful part about this Impact roster is it's constructed in a way where, yes, there's a lot of talented guys that are younger and up and coming, but there is still that, appeal of the veterans that continue to be on this roster, whether it be Frankie and Eddie Edwards and Bully Ray, and then, PCO on his way out. And then Sami Callihan was there. Rich Swann has a lot of miles on that body in a good way. There's a lot to be said about the perfect blend of experience and, implicating to get these young roster ready for bigger and better things. So really, really well done. And kudos to them for showcasing on a big show here. This is a big show that they let Eddie Edwards and Frankie Kazarian have the showcase. I know we've been down on the feud, but it just shows how much they care about their legacy acts in Impact Wrestling.
Absolutely, man. It's they're class acts always, and giving time to the veterans and the guys that helped pave the road before them.
So let's get to shock and awe. We'll give our final wrap up, get our weekend started, because believe it or not, tomorrow is Friday the 13th.
Yo.
And we're going to be moving towards further in spooky season. We'll get what else is going on in the tavern. Let's get to shock and awe.
Shock and awe.
All right, final wrap up here. Next week's show will be 10/19 for the weekly TV show and the go home, believe it or not, for Bound for Glory. So we're talking all things there. We'll be previewing Bound for Glory here, of course, but also tune in on Monday for Wrestling Tonight. We'll be previewing Bound for Glory, one of our big stories. Maybe if we're lucky enough to get Colton in the fold, he'll be on there with us. But if not, you'll get Colton's picks and takes here about Bound for Glory right here on Brace for Impact. Obviously on Thursday nights or Friday mornings if you're an audio consumer. For me, as far as some shilling goes, I will be in the house for VPW Hallowed Ground this weekend. If you guys are around, go to Bayshore, New York. You guys can check it out. There's some great pro wrestling happening in the area. You can check my link tree, check my posts on Instagram. I'll be there with the tavern table, giving out stickers, selling some stuff. I'll be there supporting independent wrestling. And then it's going to get really busy down the line. Next weekend, the same day as Bound for Glory, I'll be in Amesbury, Massachusetts for Rad Pro Wrestling Presents Power Transfer, ring announcing for them. And the weekend after that, I'll be at the Halloween Haunted Havoc show for Remarkable Wrestling in Wisconsin, New York. And then we're going to further down the line, man. We're going to have some shows in November, Dream Sequence for Remarkable Wrestling. We also have Back to the Hotel, which is announced for December. We got Restival coming up, which is going to be Youth of the Nation Remarkable Wrestling. So I'll be a busy guy for the next couple months as we say goodbye to 2023, believe it or not. And spooky seasons, good times, man. Check out Broken VCR. They're dropping all the double stuffed Halloween stuff. So make sure I know that we don't talk about them. They're like kind of on their own, doing their thing, crushing it, talking about movies, Chad and Hawk, but give them some love. They are still under the Tavern umbrella, and they absolutely are my guide during the spooky season because they're the experts. I know that Hawk was just on the Chick Foley show talking about Halloween movies, but in my opinion, Chad and Hawk are the experts as far as cinema goes. So, if they recommend a movie, I check it out, and I'm usually not disappointed. So, some good stuff. Obviously, wrestling tonight, as I talked about, Shot Nostalgia tomorrow as we cruise through Saturday night's main event. Bellcaster's back with me. We talk about main event number 1 from February 1988 with Andre the Giant winning the title from Hulk Hogan. That's going to be tomorrow. So going to be an episode you don't want to miss. All right, Colton, I did a lot of talking. What else is going on in the land of the mullet?
So here's what we got, man. You get me and Ace both on the debate this week. So coming down on Sunday on YouTube and then dropping on audio on Monday. It's a good time, man. It's always fun being on the debate show. I love it when you can get both me and Ace there with the two bad Chads. We had some good topics this week, so make sure that you tune in there. And just, man, in general, theturnbuckletavern.com. Go on there, like, subscribe, leave us a review, man. The reviews go a long way. Apple and Spotify. If you've written an Apple thing or Apple or Spotify review, thank you so much. If you've only done one, get on the other app and do the other one for us, man. Subscribe on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, Twitter, or X, if you will, Instagram, Facebook, Pro Wrestling Tees. Get yourself a t-shirt. We are anywhere and everywhere giving you guys free content 7 days a week. So, thanks for everyone who is continuing to hang with us and continuing to give us love on the socials. Man, we love doing it for you guys. And thanks for, as always, for sticking with us and hanging out in the tavern.
Cole, we got some love too on the last review that was left by the dude that recognized Hawk. I forget his name. I apologize, but he was the one that recognized Hawk at the AW Dynamite show in Indiana. And they referenced that they were watching and listening to the tavern from the early days of the DVR and NXT days to Brace for Impact. Since we are the newest edition, they're listening to us. So I thank you and appreciate your support. I'm actually going to look up his name quick so I don't forget it because he deserves to be shouted out because he's been a loyal supporter. So
is it Josh?
I think it is Josh, but I want to get it right. So
yeah,
let me just
let's
make
get
sure.
It right.
And I'm going to read the review right here on air. And if you guys review, we'll do the same thing. You guys can get a sticker, all that stuff. It's important for the tavern, the algorithm. So it says Josh too, but I'm pretty sure it's Josh. Maybe that's a username he has, but he said, been listening since they had DVR and NXT from the flagship to the newest Brace for Impact. They've had a plethora of fun and informative shows. The debate is one of their best editions, have brought many diverse perspectives to the tavern over the years, many of which have become full-time members and hosts of all the great shows they continue to come up with. Whether you're new to wrestling or a lifelong fan, these are the podcasts for you. Also, the new format of the flagship is great. It feels natural to start with the story you're most excited about and move through all the AW shows that way instead of going in chronological order. And thanks for the shout out. So Josh, man, 5-star review, really great, proud. We appreciate you, dude. Thank you for supporting the tavern. And if you ever see any of us out in the wild, I'm out in Indiana, but if you happen to be anywhere in the Long Island area, you always have my support, brother. So come up and say hi.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And if you haven't gotten a sticker or anything from us, man, hit up Ace on or me on Instagram. We'll get you some swag sent your way. We always appreciate the shout out. I'm in Kentucky, man. I'm sometimes in Indiana. I try not to be, but if I am, maybe we'll run into each other. Make sure you say hi.
Good times, guys. Well, we'll be back next week previewing all things Bound for Glory with the Go Home show again. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you after a while.